Hi, I'm Wanda from Alanda Craft, and today I'm going to show you how to make this gorgeous signature quilt. Now these are ideal for any occasion such as a birthday, a wedding or even someone retiring. You can see with the white panels here it leaves room for people to put signatures and congratulation messages on. In the background here I've got a variation on this theme. We've actually taken some of the squares out and put in a panel that we've embroidered. We made this for my granddaughter Ishta when she married Evan recently, and you can see that everyone has left their messages of congratulations, some in the squares, some on the white panels. So let's get on and show you how to make a signature quilt. Now the measurements for our signature quilt will be in a link below this video. And what we need are some strips of cream or white, and what we've done is we've cut these at 2.5 inches and simply taken the width of the fabric. We've also got a bunch of pieces here that are cut at 2.5 by 5, and then we have our 5-inch squares. Now we have this really awesome gadget that we use to get everything nice and straight. It lets us cut 2.5-inch strips perfectly, and also our 5 by 5 squares. It's a Shape Cut Pro, and we've done a review on this at one stage, and you can go and see that on our website. We've got a link below. So what we're going to do is lay this out so you can see what it's going to look like, and then you'll see that these white strips or cream strips will be used for the guests at your function to leave their messages. Okay, so we're going to lay that out and then we'll come back. Okay, so I have my pieces laid out how I want them. So when you've got yours laid out and you're quite happy, then it's time to organise the sewing part of it. So I'm going to take out these long strips because I don't need them at the moment, and it just clears the table off a bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a white strip, turn it face down onto a coloured strip and sew it up with a 1/4-inch seam. And I'm going to do each row like this. Again, just put the white strip on. And you'll see that you've got one left at the end. So that will get caught up in the piece that we sew down the side. And also when these are sewn together, I'll then be able to sew those two together. But we'll go and do that now, and then I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. Okay, so as you can see now, I've sewn the white strips to the coloured squares. And when you iron these, make sure that you iron the seam over towards the coloured square so that the seam doesn't show through your white piece here. It just looks neater. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to take each of these and sew them together, again with a 1/4-inch seam. So I'll sew that one to there, then I'll bring this one over, right sides together, sew with a 1/4-inch seam, this one here, and then you remember the square that we had on the end that was spare. That's now going to get sewn onto this white strip, and then it's still got a strip, it's still bare on the seam because we're going to put this long strip down there that will cover that. So I'll go and do that, and then I'll come and show you the next step. Okay, so as you can see, I've sewn all my strips together, and now we're going to put in the dividing sashing. Just make sure that you've cut your salvages off from your sashing. So what it'll be now is a matter of taking one piece at a time and placing right sides together, and make sure one end is flush. Okay, so those two ends match. It doesn't matter about the other end, that it's too long, because we are going to trim that later. So we'll sew those two together, and we're going to do this on each strip. So we're going to add each piece of sashing to our strips. So I'll go and do that, and then I'll come and show you the next step. Okay, so I've sewn my strips to my rows, and now I'm going to sew my rows together. So what I'm going to do is just simply fold one row over the other. Now lay your rows out, keep them all neat and tidy how you're going to do it, otherwise you'll end up in a mess. So one row at a time. Now I'm going to pin this time because I want to make sure that these strips here line up. So I need to pin that, and I find it's easier just to sew with the strip showing rather than the row, because I can keep more control over it. And as I sew down and I come to my seams, I can just push them with my finger when I get to that point to make sure that they're lying flat. So I just need to sew that, pin and sew, and that will be those rows. Now I've already done these 2 rows down here, you can see that, sewn the two together here and 2 together here. So when I finish the rows that I'm working on now, I'll come back and I'll do the same thing. I'll just take those 2 rows and place them over there like that. And again pin to make sure that everything lines up. So it's quite simple, but you do have to be methodical. So I'll finish this off and that'll be the top, but what we have to do to really finish it is the outside edge. So I'll come back and do that in a moment. Okay, so we've nearly finished the top of our quilt. So what we're going to do now is put the outside strips around. So we're going to make the short strip at the top and the bottom flush with the edges. So we'll just fold that over there and sew that on with a 1/4 inch seam. Okay, all the way along, and we'll leave it flush at the other end as well. And then we'll fold it out. And with the long strips, we're going to make them flush with the top of that strip. Okay, so not the top of your row, but the top of that strip. Right, and this piece here wasn't long enough, so what I've done is just join 2 pieces together. You'll probably have to do that depending on how long you make your quilt. So that will then fold out and sit along there. So I'll go and do that now, and then we'll come back and do the next bit. Okay, so as you can see, we've finished the top of the quilt. We've added the strips around the outside as well now, so that's all finished. All we have to do now is add our batting and our backing. So we'll show you how to do that next. So now it comes time to sandwich our quilt together. So what we did is we took our backing and we laid it on the floor, or you can lay it on your table, and smoothed it out, and then we sprayed it with an adhesive spray. And onto there we put our backing, and we put that face side up, okay, and smoothed it out against the batting. And then we put our top layer face down on top of our backing. And then we just pinned it all together, making sure that the edges are come together nicely. Now we're going to sew this around with a good 1/4 inch seam. You can use a 1/2 inch seam if you like, but just remember it will cut down the size of your border strip. So we're going to leave about an 8 inch, 6 to 8 inch piece at the top here where I'm not going to sew. So I'll begin sewing here, I'll go right around the edge, and I'll stop about here. And that's so that we can turn our quilt through. So I'll go and do that now, and then we'll come back and do the next step. So here we are. I've sewn the quilt around with a 1/4 inch seam. I've left an opening here at the top to turn the quilt through, and I've already clipped some of the corners, but I'll show you how I'm going to do that now. So I just put my glasses on so I don't clip my stitching, and that's what you need to be careful with. Okay, so just across the end there, and then I like to clip it down into the corner, just taking some of the bulk off so that it doesn't make it all big and rounded. Now if you've got any of your bits of batting that have stretched a bit, because it tends to do that, just trim them as well at the same time. Okay, so here we go, let's turn her through. As you go down to the bottom here and grab one of those corners first, drag it through, and then some at the top. And as with everything, it's just a matter of easing it through. If you're making a bigger quilt, you'll want to leave a bigger opening. Okay, so, and where was my opening? Here we top. I'm not going to push these corners out at the moment. I'll leave that and fix it up before I go and top stitch it. But you of course will take some time and make sure that your corners are pushed out so that they're nice and neat. Righto, so here we go. Isn't it looking gorgeous? Just love these colours. Okay, so here we go. So now we'll give it a press, and then I'm going to top stitch about, probably about 1/8 of an inch around, all the way around, and that will then seal in our opening at the top here. So I'm going to go and do that now. Then I'll come back and show you what we've done, and then we'll be on to the final step, which will be Paula's job, to ditch stitch. Okay, well we're getting there. So now I've finished top stitching around the edge, as you can see here, which keeps everything nice and neat on the edge and gives it a little bit more strength. So now we're going to go, and we've also caught in the top bit where we had the opening, so that's all nicely sealed off now. So now we're going to go and ditch stitch it. Okay, now in preparation for ditch stitching, we've actually pinned the quilt, and this keeps the batting in place so it won't slip everywhere and bunch up. Now what we'll start with is we're going to do the edges, so we start at the top and we sew all the way down. You've got a seam here that you can stitch into, so you know how to ditch stitch. You just pull that aside a little bit and stitch into that seam. We'll go all the way down. Then we'll do this exact same thing on the other side. Start at the top, follow the seam line down all the way to the bottom. Then we're going to do these ones. Now we're going to start at the first block here at this corner and just come all the way across to the end of that block, and the same on the other end. Now once we've done that, we'll come to the middle of the quilt. We like to start in the middle of the quilt. It stops any of this bunching up that you get with the batting. So we'll start here, or here, it doesn't really matter. We don't have to worry about doing a stitch here because we've already stitched that when we've done the sides. So we'll start here, and we'll go across to the end, and now you can either back stitch, so just do a little back stitch to hold these ends in, or you can just do the tie-off method where you leave some long thread, pull them through to the back, do a knot, and it pulls into the back of the quilt. We're going to do the back stitch method because we want this to be quick and easy for you. So we've done that row, then we'll do this row, and we'll do each row going long ways. And when we finish those, we're going to do these rows. Now you'll notice that you don't have a seam line here, so just be a little bit attentive, but careful as you sew between the blocks so that you get a nice straight edge. But again, you'll start at the top and sew right down to the end. So we're going to do that now, and then we'll show you what it's like when it's finished.
Okay, so now I'm ready to stitch in the ditch, and what I have is my top thread is a colour that matches the top of my quilt, and my bobbin thread is a thread that matches the bottom of my quilt. So unless you want a contrasting thread, but otherwise choose ones that match the top and the bottom. Okay, so we're going to drop our foot down, and what we're going to do is sew from the very top here, just below the top stitch line. So I'm going to put my needle in the down position. If you've got one, use it. And then I'm just going to do a couple of stitches, just like that, and then do a back stitch. So you can do a back stitch is fine, or you can do the tie-off method if you prefer. I just prefer a back stitch for this type of quilt. It's quick and easy, and especially if you want this done in a day, this is the best way to do it. And when you're ditch stitching, basically what you're doing is stitching in the seam line. So do it as best as you can. Doesn't matter if you go off a little bit. You don't really notice, to be quite honest. And you just want to get your hands and just sort of stretch it out a little bit. Not too much, just a little bit, just to enable you to easily get in that stitch line. And that's pretty much it. So you want to go right down to the end. I'll keep going right down to the bottom of this quilt, and I'll do a back stitch at the bottom, and that will finish this line. And as Wanda said, you just continue on doing each of the rows here until you're done.
Okay, so here we are with our finished quilt, and once you've finished quilting it, give it a good press. Isn't it just gorgeous? It looks amazing. There's the back. Brilliant. So if you've liked this tutorial or it's been of some help to you, please give us a thumbs up And if you'd like more tutorials, why not subscribe to our channel?